For 9 years, I paid every cent of my cousin's bills. For 9 years, she told my entire family that I was the one who couldn't keep the lights on. My name is Rhea Youngman. I'm 38. I'm a commercial pilot out of Knoxville, Tennessee. And the woman I loved like a sister, the woman I kept afloat for nearly a decade, spent that entire time telling everyone she was the one carrying me. The family believed her. Every last one. But here's what I can't stop replaying. 2 Saturdays ago, Darlene walked into my grandmother's farmhouse for the annual Labor Day gathering, looked me dead in the face, and said, "You look good, Rhea. Things must finally be turning around for you." Finally. Now, if you're already feeling something, I need you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because what happened at that Labor Day gathering is the reason 41 people in my family now have Darlene's real phone number blocked. And the moment her husband Britt stood up from that picnic table and looked at her like he'd never seen her before in his life, you're going to want to be here for that. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from right now, what time it is where you are. I want to know who's riding this one with me. But to understand how we got to that picnic table, I need to take you back to the fall of 2015. The night Darlene called me crying so hard I could barely understand a single word. September 2015. I was 29 years old, 2 years into my first officer gig with a regional carrier out of McGee-Tyson Airport. I was making decent money, not rich by any stretch, but comfortable for the first time in my adult life. I had a 1-bedroom apartment off Kingston Pike with a balcony overlooking a parking lot. But I loved sitting out there after night flights, watching the sun come up over the Smokies. I had a used Civic with 94,000 miles on it, and I was putting away $600 a month into savings. I felt like I'd finally built something solid underneath me. Darlene and I grew up together, literally. Our dads were brothers, and after my dad passed when I was 7, heart attack on the floor of the Alcoa plant, dead before the ambulance arrived, Uncle Porter kind of stepped in. Not officially. He never adopted me or anything like that. But he made sure I was at every holiday, every birthday, every Sunday supper at my grandmother Opal's farmhouse out on Pellissippi Road. And Darlene was always there waiting. She was 2 years older than me, and for most of my childhood, she was my whole world. We shared a room at Opal's place during summers, stayed up past midnight talking about boys and school and what we wanted to be when we grew up. She wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to fly planes. She'd laugh and say, "Girl, you're gonna fly right out of this town and forget all about us." And I'd say, "Never." We made matching friendship bracelets out of embroidery thread when I was 9. Blue and green, our favorite colors. I kept mine in my nightstand drawer until I was 26 years old. So when she called me that September night in 2015, sobbing into the phone, saying Britt had lost his job at the manufacturing plant in Maryville, and they were 3 months behind on the mortgage and the bank was sending warning letters, I didn't even hesitate. Not for 1 second. I said, "How much do you need?" She said $8,200 to get current. I had $11,400 in savings. It had taken me almost 2 years to build that. I transferred $8,200 the next morning before my 6 a.m. pre-flight checklist. And here's the thing. I didn't think of it as a sacrifice. I genuinely didn't. That's what family does, right? You show up. You don't keep a ledger. Darlene would have done the same for me. At least that's what I told myself every single month. When the amount got bigger and the timeline kept stretching, and the couple months turned into 6, and 6 turned into 10, and 10 turned into a year. Somewhere in that first year, Darlene asked if I could just cover the mortgage directly, set up an auto pay from my account to their lender. "Just until Britt gets back on his feet," she said. It's easier than me having to ask every month. I hate asking Rhea. You know I do. And I believed that. I believed she hated it. She sounded so small on the phone, so ashamed. She was good at that, making you feel like you were the strong one, like your help was the most natural thing in the world, like saying no would be cruel and unnecessary. I set it up on October 3rd, 2015. I didn't cancel it until July 14th, 2024. That's 8 years and 9 months. That's $2,743 every single month. I've done the math more times than I want to admit. $288,015 in mortgage payments alone, not counting everything else. Cala's braces, $5,800. Their water heater in 2018, $2,100. Brit's truck transmission, $3,400. Darlene's root canal, $1,900. Cala's cheerleading camp each summer, $1,250 a pop. The grocery runs Darlene would ask me to cover real quick that always seemed to come out north of $300. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The money is the skeleton of this story. The lie is the thing that keeps me awake. Back to the present. 6 weeks before Labor Day, I was sitting in the crew lounge at McGee Tyson waiting on my gate assignment. A Tuesday afternoon. I remember because Tuesdays were my short rotation days. Just a round trip to Atlanta and back, home by dinner. My phone rang, and the screen said, Aunt Willa. Now, Aunt Willa, Uncle Porter's wife, Darlene's mother, and I have always had a kind of measured relationship. She's never been cold to me, but she's never been warm either. She sends me a card every birthday. She asks about my flights at family dinners, makes pleasant conversation, but she doesn't call me. Not out of the blue. Definitely not on a random Tuesday afternoon in August. I picked up. She said, Rhea, honey, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. And then she said, and I wrote the words down on a napkin because I knew immediately something was wrong. Porter and I have been discussing it, and we'd like to offer to cover your rent for a few months. Darlene told us you've been struggling since that apartment complex raised the rates, and we just don't want you to feel like you're alone in this. I stared at the departure board. Gate B7, Flight 4418, boarding in 40 minutes. My rent hadn't gone up. I didn't rent. I owned my condo outright. I'd bought it in 2021 with cash. $187,000 for a 2-bedroom in West Knoxville. Because I'd been living lean for years. Because more than half my take-home was going to cover Darlene's household. But I'd still managed to save enough to buy a home without a mortgage. Because that's what happens when a pilot works 200 hours a month and eats canned soup for dinner 4 nights a week for 6 years straight. Aunt Willa, I said, what exactly has Darlene been telling you about me? And that's when the floor dropped out. Aunt Willa started listing things. Things Darlene had apparently been telling the family for years. That I was behind on rent. That I'd borrowed money from Darlene multiple times. $500 here, $800 there. That I'd had my utilities disconnected in 2020, and Darlene had paid my electric bill. That I'd almost taken out a payday loan, and Darlene had talked me out of it and covered the expense herself. That Darlene had been quietly helping me out for years because she didn't want to embarrass me in front of the family. She said Uncle Porter had discussed it with Uncle Gus and my cousin Marlo at Thanksgiving last year. They'd all been worried about me. Porter apparently said, I just wish Rhea would let us help her the way Darlene does. But she's too proud. Proud. Like my independence, my actual, real independence, was a character flaw. Like the fact that I didn't need help was a stubborn refusal to admit what was right in front of me. Like the fact that I was the one giving help
was somehow invisible. I missed my gate call. First time in 16 years of flying. What Darlene had built on my silence, I was still finding new rooms in it. And we haven't even gotten to the worst part yet.
Let me take you back. Because the money was only the scaffolding, the lie was the building. By 2017, 2 years in, I was covering the mortgage plus Darlene's car insurance, another $290 a month. Britt had picked up some part-time warehouse work, but nothing steady. And Darlene? Darlene was doing what Darlene always did. She was being the sun that everything orbited around. That's the thing people don't understand about my cousin. She's not some obvious villain you'd spot across the room. Darlene Fitch is warm. She's funny. She remembers every birthday without checking Facebook. She brings the best sweet potato casserole to every church potluck. She sends handwritten thank you cards. She volunteers at the elementary school book fair every October and organizes the family group chat and shows up with flowers when someone's in the hospital. She's magnetic. I mean, genuinely magnetic. And people love being around her. They light up when she walks in. I loved it too. That's what made the whole thing work for so long. You don't suspect the person who makes the room feel warm. I remember this one Thanksgiving, 2017. I'd just gotten back from a 4-day rotation. Denver to Houston to Chicago to Knoxville. Short layovers, rough weather over Kansas. The kind of stretch that wrings you out. I drove straight from the airport to Opal's farmhouse because Darlene had texted, "Everyone's asking about you. Get your butt over here. I saved you a plate." Little heart emoji. I walked in and the house was full. Aunt Willa and Uncle Porter in the living room. Marlo on the couch. Uncle Gus and his wife Trish in the kitchen, arguing about gravy. Opal in her recliner by the front window with her oxygen tank and the crocheted blanket she'd had since before I was born. And Darlene. Darlene was at the stove, apron over a burgundy sweater, stirring gravy with one hand. She saw me in the doorway and her face lit up. She put the spoon down and came around the counter and hugged me so hard I could smell her perfume. Vanilla something, the kind she'd worn since high school. "I'm so glad you're here," she whispered. And she meant it. I could feel it in the hug. Whatever else was happening in the rooms I wasn't in that specific moment, Darlene was glad I was standing in her grandmother's kitchen. That's the part that still tangles me up. Because she wasn't faking the hug. She was faking everything around it. What I didn't know was that 30 minutes before I walked through that door, Darlene had been in the living room telling Aunt Willa and Uncle Porter that she'd wired me $500 the week before to help with groceries. She said it with this reluctant, pained voice, like she didn't want to betray my confidence, but she was just so worried. And everyone at the table nodded and looked sympathetic and murmured, "That's so kind of you, Darlene," and "Poor Rhea." I was standing in that kitchen eating pecan pie that I'd indirectly funded, being pitied by people I was keeping afloat, and I had absolutely no idea. "You look thin, Rhea," Darlene said at that dinner table, tilting her head with that careful, worried frown. She reached across the table and touched my wrist. A gentle touch, motherly almost. "Are you taking care of yourself? I know things have been tight." She said it in front of the entire table. 11 people. With that warm, concerned tone that made it sound like the most caring thing anyone could say. And every single person at that table looked at me with these soft, pitying eyes. Opal reached over from her recliner at the end of the table and squeezed my hand with her thin, papery fingers. "You come eat here any time you need to, baby girl," she said. "This kitchen is always open for you." I wasn't thin because things were tight. I was thin because I'd been running 5 miles every morning at 5 a.m. to manage the stress of quietly funding 2 households on 1 income. but I just smiled across the table and said, "I'm fine, Dar, really. Just been busy with the flight schedule." She squeezed my shoulder. "Well, you know I'm always here for you." I could have screamed, but I didn't know why yet. I want to pause here. Have you ever sat at a table full of people who loved you and pitied you for something that wasn't true? Where the concern was real, but the reason behind it was completely manufactured by someone sitting right next to you? If you know that feeling, that dizzy, upside-down confusion of being cared for and erased at the same time, tell me in the comments. Because I still didn't know the half of it. Not until I opened my laptop and started counting. Present. After the phone call with Aunt Willa, I did something I'd never done before. Something I should have done years ago, but never felt the need to. Because I trusted Darlene the way you trust gravity. I sat down at my kitchen counter with my laptop, logged into my bank account, and pulled up every statement going back to September 2015. 9 years. I opened Venmo and scrolled through the transaction history. I found the autopay confirmation emails. One on the first of every month. 105 of them. Each a quiet little notification that $2,743 had left my account. I found the paper check images for one-off expenses. I went through text messages and found every single conversation where Darlene had asked for money. Always gently, always apologetically, always with, "I'll pay you back," or "just until next month," or "You're saving our lives, Rhea, you know that." I built a spreadsheet. Date, amount, description, running total. The number at the bottom made me slide off the bar stool and sit on the kitchen floor. $347,211. Over 9 years. To a woman who told my family I couldn't afford groceries. I sat on that cold tile floor for I don't know how long, my laptop glowing on the counter above me. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. Not yet. What I felt was this enormous, suffocating disorientation. The room I'd been standing in for 9 years wasn't the room I thought it was. I couldn't make the two versions of Darlene exist in the same person. The one who whispered, "I'm so glad you're here," at Thanksgiving, and the one who walked into the next room and told everyone I was her charity project. Both were real. Both lived in the same body. I called Darlene the next morning. I needed to hear her voice. I needed to know if the world sounded different now that I knew what she'd been saying in rooms I wasn't in. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, girl! I was literally just thinking about you." She always said literally. "Yeah? What were you thinking?" "That we need to get together before Labor Day. Maybe do lunch at that bistro on Market Square?" My treat. Her treat. With my money. I said sure. Sounded great. I'd check my schedule. And then I hung up and sat in my car in the parking lot of the condo I owned outright. The condo my family believed I could barely afford, and pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and stayed there until the sun went behind the ridge. But the money was the part I could count. What Darlene had done to my name. That needed a different kind of accounting. 2019. The year it got truly ugly. By then, I was a captain. I'd upgraded 8 months earlier. Youngest female captain in my carrier's regional fleet, though nobody in my family knew that because I never talked about milestones. My salary had jumped, and on paper, I should have been comfortable. But my bank account told a different story. Because by 2019, I was covering the mortgage at $2,743, the car insurance at $290, Kala's tuition at web school at $1,100 a month, and a carousel of emergencies that arrived every 6 to 8 weeks. Broken dishwasher, $650. Vet bill for their beagle, Roscoe, $1,800. Kala's cheerleading camp, $1,250. Brit's back surgery copay, $4,200. The total for 2019 alone was $51,400. My spreadsheet doesn't lie. Britt had steady work by then, maintenance supervisor at a trucking company in Alcoa, pulling maybe $48,000 a year. Decent money for East Tennessee. But Darlene never once said, "We can handle the mortgage now, Rhea." She never even hinted at it. And I never pushed, because pushing felt like rubbing their faces in it. I need to tell you about Britt for a second. Britt Fitch is not a bad man. He's quiet, 6'2", built like a guy who's been lifting engine blocks since he was 18. Soft-spoken to a fault. The kind of man who shakes your hand with both of his and looks at the floor when he's uncomfortable. Every time I saw him at a family gathering, he'd grip my hand a beat too long and say, "We're gonna make this right, Rhea. I mean that." And there was something in his eyes, this pained, embarrassed sincerity that made me believe him every time. But once, just for a second, I caught him glancing at Darlene while he said it. I thought it was embarrassment. I filed it away and forgot about it. But Britt wasn't in the kitchen when Darlene was performing. He was in the garage with the cousins, or out back on the grill, or watching football with Gus. He wasn't sitting at that table when Darlene leaned across to Aunt Willa and said the thing that wakes me up at 3 a.m. She said, and Willa repeated it back to me during our phone call, word for word, because it had burrowed into her. "Sometimes I think Rhea resents me for having a family." She doesn't say it, but I can feel it. Like she's jealous that I have Britt and Calla and this house and this life, and all she has is that empty apartment and those flights. I try to help her, Willa. I really do. But she's so proud. She won't even admit she needs it. Jealous, proud, empty. That's how my cousin described me to my aunt, the woman who was paying Darlene's mortgage, who funded her daughter's education, who covered her husband's surgery, who ate rice and canned tuna for 6 months in 2016 so that Calla could start at web school. Empty. I keep circling back to that word, because it didn't just erase my sacrifice. It inverted it. It took 9 years of giving everything I had and turned it into having nothing. It took my choice to be generous and made it look like I had no choices at all. I need to sit with that for a second, because here's the thing I keep turning over. I could confront Darlene. I could blow the whole thing open. But if I do that, the family I've been funding, every holiday, every picnic table, every Sunday supper, it all comes apart. Or I stay quiet. I let the lie stand. And Darlene gets to be the saint who carried poor Rhea for the rest of our lives. Tell me which one you'd pick, because someone in that family was already putting the pieces together. And she was 16 years old. Present. 3 weeks before the gathering. I hadn't confronted Darlene. I'd talked to Aunt Willa 2 more times, and each conversation was like pulling a thread on a sweater that wouldn't stop unraveling. The lie wasn't one lie. It was dozens of them, custom built for each person. To Aunt Willa, I was struggling financially and too proud to ask for help. To my cousin Marlo, I had a gambling problem. That's why I was always broke. Darlene had apparently told Marlo this during a girls' weekend in Pigeon Forge in 2020, whispered it like a confession. And Marlo had bought it because I was single. I traveled constantly, and I seemed like the type. To Uncle Gus, I'd been borrowing from Darlene for years and never repaying, and Darlene was too kind to push the issue. And to my grandmother Opal, before she passed in September 2022, Darlene had told her she was secretly putting money into a savings account for me because she was afraid I'd spend it on bad habits. My grandmother died thinking I couldn't take care of myself. Opal spent the last 1.5 years of her life. After the stroke,
After her world shrank to that recliner and that farmhouse, worrying about me, asking Gus, "Is Rhea eating?" Asking Porter, "Has anyone checked on Rhea?" And Darlene went to visit Opal every single week. She'd sit in that living room and hold Opal's hand and fill that old woman's heart with worry about a granddaughter who was doing just fine. Better than fine. But Opal never knew that. That's the one that broke something in me that I don't think will ever fully heal. The money. I can calculate the money. The reputation. Reputations recover. But you can't go back and give a dead woman peace. You can't erase the last 18 months of worry that Darlene planted in my grandmother's heart. That's stolen time. That's stolen love. And there's no spreadsheet for that. Okay, Calla. In early August, I got a text from Calla. "Aunt Rhea, can I ask you something kind of weird?" I said sure. "Mom told Grandma Willa last week that you asked her for money again. Like $800 for something. Did you?" I typed and deleted 4 different answers. Part of me wanted to explain everything. Part of me knew she was 16 and this wasn't her weight to carry. Finally, I wrote, "No, sweetheart. I didn't ask for any money." 1 word came back. Okay. But that okay carried something. I could feel it through the phone. Something clicked into place for Calla. Something she'd been circling for a long time. She'd heard things. She'd filed them away the way quiet kids do. And now one of those things had a name. The night before Labor Day, 11 p.m., I was standing in my bathroom in the outfit I'd chosen. Navy blue linen button-down, nice jeans, the leather boots I keep for occasions. I looked at my reflection and said out loud, "You're going to that farmhouse. You're going to sit at that table. You're going to look her in the eye." 3 times. Until I believed it. Until it felt like a pre-flight briefing I could actually execute. The peacemaker. That's always been my role. The one who smooths things over. Who swallows the hard thing so the table stays comfortable. But this wasn't about comfort anymore. This was about my grandmother dying worried. This was about a $347,000 sacrifice being repackaged as pity. This was about a woman standing on my back and telling everyone she was carrying me. And I could not let that be the final chapter.
Before I walk into that farmhouse, I need you to understand one more thing. 2021. This is the piece that connects everything. February. My grandmother Opal had a stroke. She survived, barely, but she couldn't live alone anymore. She needed round-the-clock care. The family held a meeting at the farmhouse to sort it out. 12 people around that long dining table figuring out logistics. Who would visit when, how the costs would be handled, what the long-term plan looked like. I wasn't there. 3-day rotation. Nashville, Memphis, Knoxville. Turn around and do it again. I asked Uncle Porter if they could postpone until Thursday when I'd be home. He said, "Don't worry, Rhea, we'll catch you up." So I let it go. I trusted the family. I trusted Darlene. Darlene was there, and according to what I pieced together afterward, from Willa, from Marlo, and from a conversation Calla overheard and remembered with the precision of a girl who reads mystery novels and pays attention to everything, Darlene volunteered to manage Opal's finances. She said she had experience with household budgets. She said she'd handle the Medicare applications, the home health aid scheduling, the grocery deliveries, all the bill paying from Opal's savings account. "I want to do this for Grandma," she said. She'd do it for any of us. The family agreed. Every single person at that table. Because Darlene was the capable one, the selfless one, the one who held the family together. Around 2021 and 2022, I noticed things. Darlene's family seemed to be living beyond their means. New furniture in the living room. Calla wearing nicer clothes. Darlene talking about a vacation they'd taken to Destin.
I assumed Britt had gotten a raise or picked up overtime. I didn't ask. I never asked about their money. It felt wrong, given how much of mine was already going to their household. $22,800. That's what Darlene took from a 91-year-old woman who trusted her granddaughter to take care of her. 19 months of $1,200 redirected from Opal's savings into Darlene's personal checking account. March 2021 through September 2022, until the day Opal died. If that one hit you, go ahead and subscribe. Hit the like button, because what I did at that Labor Day table was for her. I didn't learn this until after Labor Day. Britt found it in the financial records during the separation. But I'm telling you now because it connects to the farmhouse. When Opal passed, the house on Pellissippi Road went to the family collectively, shared among Porter, Gus, and my father's share, which passed to me. But the property taxes were delinquent. The county had mailed notices. $4,100 in back taxes needed to be paid, or a lien would go on the property. Darlene called me. "Rhea, Opal's house is going to get a lien. It needs $4,100 for back taxes. Can you cover it? I'll pay you back." I paid within 48 hours. Because that was Opal's house. The porch where she sat. The kitchen where she taught me to make pecan pie when I was 8. The room where I slept next to Darlene during summers. I would have paid 50 times that. Darlene told the family she paid the taxes. I was funding the stage. Every picnic table, every rocking chair, every square foot of that farmhouse where the family gathered to shake their heads and pity poor Rhea, I was paying to keep it standing. And every time I sat in that house at Thanksgiving or Labor Day, surrounded by people who loved me but felt sorry for me, I was the only person who didn't know the script. And now, today, Labor Day morning, I was going to walk into that house knowing every word of it. I was awake at 4 a.m. I made coffee, sat on my condo balcony in the dark and watched the first light rise over the Smokies. And by the time that sun was fully up, I was already dressed, already driving, already deciding.
Labor Day, Pellissippi Road. I pulled into the gravel driveway at 11:15 a.m. Darlene's white Tahoe, the one I'd helped make payments on, Britt's navy truck, Willa's silver sedan, Marlo's Jeep, Uncle Gus's Buick, Porter's old Ford, a couple of other cars from the Johnson City cousins. The farmhouse looked exactly the way it always did. White clapboard, green shutters, wide front porch with the 4 rocking chairs, the smell of hickory smoke drifting from the backyard, and country music, something old and slow, from a speaker out back. It felt like home. I sat in the car for 3 minutes, hands on the wheel, not shaking. I'd passed through shaking at 4 a.m. What I felt now was clarity. Hard, clean clarity. The kind that settles in when you've already done the hardest part, which is deciding. I walked around back. The yard was set up the same way it always was. Folding tables pushed end to end, mismatched lawn chairs, the old sunflower tablecloth Opal had used for decades, paper plates, red cups, a cooler of sweet tea, Marlo's kids chasing each other in the grass. Darlene saw me first. She was standing by the grill holding a platter of corn, wearing a yellow sundress with her hair pinned up. She smiled, that big, genuine, magnetic Darlene smile, and called out, "There she is! We were worried you weren't coming." "I'm here," I said. I hugged her. I smelled the vanilla perfume. I felt her arms tighten, and I thought, 9 years. I hugged Aunt Willa, shook Britt's hand, that familiar extra beat, that pained, grateful grip. Found Calla in one of the porch rocking chairs with a fantasy novel. I kissed the top of her head. She looked up at me with those quiet, knowing eyes and didn't say a word. I made a plate. I sat down. For about 45 minutes,
I just breathed it in. The laughter, the bickering, Porter burning the hot dogs and blaming the grill, the afternoon light through the hickory trees turning everything gold, Britt telling a work story while Gus tried to top it, Marlo showing Willa something on her phone, Calla reading on the porch, and for one clear, terrible moment, I almost left. I looked at my car in the driveway and thought, I could just go. I could drive home. I could let the lie live and keep the table intact. That thought lasted about 10 seconds. Then I looked at Opal's rocking chair on the porch, the empty one, and the 10 seconds were over. Silence isn't loyalty. Sometimes it's just a more comfortable kind of betrayal. Would you have spoken? Would you have opened your mouth at that table, with that sunflower tablecloth and those red cups and every person you love sitting right there? Would you have said it? Drop it in the comments before you hear what happened, because Aunt Willa just picked up a knife and started cutting Opal's pecan pie. Then Aunt Willa stood up. She'd baked Opal's pecan pie, the recipe Darlene had preserved and passed along after Opal died. She set it in the center of the table, started slicing, and she said, casually, warmly, the way you say something you absolutely believe, I'm just so grateful for Darlene. She really does hold this family together, especially after everything she's done for Rhea over the years. Not everyone has a cousin like that. The table murmured. People nodded, smiled at Darlene, looked at me with that expression I now had a name for, manufactured pity, like I should be thankful for charity I never received. Darlene looked at her plate and did a little modest shrug, a gentle wave of her hand. Oh, stop it, she said. That's just what family does. I put my fork down. The clink was louder than I expected. What exactly has Darlene done for me, Aunt Willa? My voice was calm, not loud. Every fork stopped. Every conversation died.
Willa blinked. Well, honey, you know, helping you when things got difficult. The rent, the groceries. She never made a big deal of it, but we all know she's been looking out for you. I nodded slowly. Let me ask the table something. How much money do you think Darlene has given me over the years? Total. Round number. Nobody spoke. Darlene's fork had stopped moving. Uncle Porter cleared his throat. Rhea, this isn't really the... How much? Willa said quietly. I don't know. 15, maybe 20,000 over the years? I looked directly at Darlene. She was sitting very still. Her hands were in her lap now, hidden under the table. The real number, I said, is 0. $0. 0 cents. In 9 years, Darlene has never given me a single penny. Not for rent, not for groceries, not for utilities, not for a cup of coffee. She has never wired me money. She has never covered a bill. She has never handed me an envelope. 0. The silence pressed against the table. Heavy, physical. Darlene set her napkin on the table with deliberate calm. Rhea, this isn't the time or the place for... The real number is that I have paid $347,000 to Darlene's mortgage lender, her car insurance company, her daughter's school, her husband's medical bills, and about 40 other things over 9 years. I set up an auto pay to her mortgage company on October 3rd, 2015. $2,743 a month. Every month. For 8 years and 9 months. I canceled it 6 weeks ago. Britt's head turned slowly toward his wife. $347,000? Darlene's face went through 4 expressions in about 2 seconds. Surprise, anger, calculation, and then that tight, controlled smile.
The one she deploys when she's deciding which version of herself to become. "You're exaggerating, Rhea," she said. Her voice had gone flat. No warmth left. "You helped a few times, and I appreciate that. But you're blowing this completely out of—" "I have the bank statements. All of them. 9 years of auto-pay confirmations. Venmo records. Check images. I have a spreadsheet, Darlene. Date, amount, description, running total. It's on my phone. Do you want me to read it line by line?" Nobody moved. The only sound was Marlowe's kids laughing somewhere on the far side of the yard, unaware of what was happening at the grown-ups table. "I have done nothing but try to help you," Darlene said, and her voice was climbing now, losing the polish. "I have been there for you since we were kids. I held this family together while you flew around the country living your little single life. And this is how you repay me? By humiliating me at grandmother's table? At her house?" That's when Calla spoke. She'd been on the porch. I'd almost forgotten she was there. But she stood up from the rocking chair with that dragon book still in one hand and walked to the top of the porch steps and said, in a voice that was quiet and clear and somehow older than 16, "Mom, I texted Aunt Rhea last week and asked if she'd borrowed money from you. You told Grandma Willa she asked you for $800. Aunt Rhea said she didn't ask for anything." Every person at the table turned to look at Calla. Darlene's jaw went tight. "Calla Ann, go inside. Right now. I've been hearing you talk about Aunt Rhea on the phone for years," Calla said. She wasn't angry. She wasn't performing. She was just setting rocks down, one at a time, that she'd been carrying since she was old enough to understand what lying sounded like. "You tell Grandma she's broke. You told Marlowe she gambles. You told Grandpa that she had her power shut off. None of it is true, is it?" It wasn't a question.
Britt stared at the table. His jaw was working. I watched him doing the math. 9 years, $2,743 a month, a wife who said she held the family together, a cousin being described as broke while she funded everything. His eyes moved from Darlene to me and back to Darlene, and the expression on his face shifted. Confusion first, then recognition, then something darker settling behind it. Britt's chair scraped back from the table. He stood. "Darlene, she's a child, Britt. She's taking things out of context. She doesn't—" "Is it true?" "I was protecting this family." "Is it true?" I'd never heard Britt Fitch raise his voice. Not once. The man speaks in a near whisper. But he was standing with both hands on the table edge, and his neck was red, and he was staring at his wife with the look of a person watching two realities collide. Darlene's mouth opened, closed, opened. "I was protecting us," she said, quieter, and something in her voice broke, just for a second. I saw something behind her eyes that looked like the girl who made me a friendship bracelet at age 11. Something frightened, something cornered, and then it was gone, and the performance was back. "You all act like I'm the villain," she said. "But somebody had to manage things. Somebody had to keep up appearances. And yes, Rhea helped us financially. Fine. But I helped her in ways nobody appreciates. I kept her name respectable. I made sure nobody looked down on her for being alone. By telling them I was broke, I said. By telling them I gamble. By telling Grandma Opal, while she was dying, that I couldn't feed myself." Darlene didn't answer. For once in her life, she had nothing to say. Uncle Porter, 71, bad knees, the quietest man in any room, pushed himself slowly out of his chair. Everyone looked at him. He looked at Darlene for a long time, then at me.
Then back at Darlene. Rhea, honey, he said, who's been paying the property taxes on this house? I have, I said. Since 2019. $4,100 in back taxes plus the annuals since. Darlene asked me to cover it. She told you she was the one paying. Porter closed his eyes. He stood there for what felt like a full minute with his eyes shut and his hand on the back of his chair, and I watched every illusion he'd held about his daughter crumble behind those closed eyelids. Then he opened his eyes. He started to say something, stopped, looked down at the sunflower tablecloth. His mouth moved once, without sound. Then he found it. Darlene, I think you need to leave. She stood, picked up her purse from the grass, didn't cry, didn't apologize. She looked at me and said, and this is the last thing she said to me at that table, you'll regret this, Rhea. When this family falls apart, you'll know you're the one who broke it. I looked at her. The yard was quiet. The grill was still smoking. You broke this family. Then you blamed me. She walked around the side of the house. Car door, engine, gravel, gone.
The next hour was something I'll carry permanently. Not in a bad way, in a complicated, heavy, necessary way. Marlo found me by the sweet tea cooler. Her eyes were red. The gambling thing, she said. I told 3 people. I believed every word, Rhea. I'm so sorry. She's convincing, I said. I should have called you. I should have just picked up the phone and asked. Yeah, I said. You should have. Then I hugged her, because she was crying, and because holding a grudge against Marlo for believing something that was designed to be believed wasn't going to undo anything. Aunt Willa sat in Opal's rocking chair and wept quietly, with her hands folded, the way women from that generation grieve when they realize they've been wrong about someone they raised. Before Darlene left, she and Britt had gone into the kitchen, closed the door. But the windows were open the way they always are in September, and sound carries through that old farmhouse. His voice was low and relentless. Hers was rising, losing shape, and at one point, sharp and desperate, cutting through the plaster and glass, Darlene said, You knew we needed her money, Britt. You knew that. Don't you dare stand there and pretend you didn't benefit from every dollar she sent. And there it was, through thin walls and open windows, in a house full of people who'd spent 9 years believing a story that was built entirely upside down. Darlene admitted it. Not to me, not on purpose, but she said it loud enough for the porch to hear. She needed my money. She always needed it. And the lie wasn't cruelty for fun. It was infrastructure. If the family thought Darlene was the generous one helping struggling Rhea, nobody would ever wonder where her money came from. Nobody would question how a family on 1.5 incomes kept a $2,743 mortgage current for nearly a decade. The lie was load-bearing. Uncle Gus found me by the edge of the yard where the grass turns into what used to be Opal's vegetable garden. He walked up with 2 beers and handed me one without a word. We stood there watching the late light move through the trees. The grill was still smoking. Nobody had thought to shut it off. Your grandmother, he said after a while. She worried about you every day after the stroke. She'd call me. Gus, is Rhea eating? And I'd say, She's fine, Opal. But in my head, I was thinking, well, Darlene said she's struggling, so maybe I should be worried too. He took a long pull from his beer. I should have called you myself. I should have just picked up the phone. I didn't answer. I stood in Opal's garden, where she'd grown tomatoes and beans and the squash nobody liked but she planted anyway, and I let the weight settle. My grandmother spent her last months worrying about me because Darlene planted that worry and watered it every week during her visits. She took Opal's love for me and turned it into fear. Gus walked back toward the house. I stayed. The garden was overgrown now.
Nobody had tended it since Opal died. I reached down and pulled a weed from between two tomato stakes that were still standing, and my hand started shaking. One sob came up out of me. Hard, involuntary, the kind you catch in your throat before it turns into something you can't stop. I pressed my palm against my mouth and held it there until it passed. I wiped my face. I walked back toward the house. You can fix a lot of things, but you can't go back and give peace to a woman who's already gone. That arithmetic doesn't balance. It never will. Calla found me on the front porch steps about an hour later. Most people had left or drifted inside. The sun was going low, stretching shadows across the gravel driveway. Just my car and Porter's truck and Gus's Buick remained. She sat next to me, dragon book in her lap. "Aunt Rhea?" "Yeah, sweetheart?" "I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. I should have told someone way before today." I put my arm around her. She felt small next to me. She was small. She was 16 years old, and she'd stood on that porch and done something most adults couldn't. "You said something when it mattered," I told her. That took more guts than anything I did today. She leaned into my shoulder. "I heard her on the phone once, like 2 years ago. She was telling someone, probably Grandma Willa, that you asked for $800 to pay your electric bill. And I was confused because the week before you'd taken me to that steakhouse downtown on Gay Street for my birthday. You paid for everything. You bought me that little silver bracelet at the jewelry shop next door. And I remember sitting in the car on the way home thinking, if Aunt Rhea can't pay her electric bill, how is she buying me dinner and jewelry?" But I was 14. I didn't know what to do with it. "You were 14. I said. "You shouldn't have had to do anything with it." "Yeah." She watched a firefly pulse in the darkening garden. "Is it true? The $347,000? "It's true." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "That's a lot of love, Aunt Rhea." I didn't know what to say, because she was right. It was love. 9 years of it, translated into wire transfers and auto pays and Venmo and envelopes, and hours on the phone listening to someone cry who was stealing from me. And the return on that love was a family that pitied me, a grandmother who died afraid for me, and a cousin who wore my generosity like it was her own coat. But Calla looked at those numbers and didn't see weakness or stupidity. She saw love. And sitting on those porch steps with the evening coming down and the hickory smoke fading, a 16-year-old girl calling my sacrifice by its real name was the first time in 9 years someone had seen me accurately. That was enough. For right now, that was enough. The months after moved fast. Britt filed for separation in October. He found the $22,800 Darlene had taken from Opal's savings. He found 3 credit cards she'd opened in his name. Total balance, $41,000. The woman who spent 9 years claiming she held the family together couldn't hold her own finances together without stealing from a dying grandmother and a husband who trusted her. Willa and Porter stopped speaking to Darlene. Willa started taking Calla on Saturday mornings. Coffee shop in Maryville. Books and scones. A quiet space away from the wreckage. Calla was living with Britt by December. She seemed lighter. She texted me every Tuesday. Pictures of sunsets. Questions about how planes stay in the air. Memes she thought were funny. Marlo called everyone she'd told the gambling lie to and corrected it. She said some of them didn't believe the correction at first. That's how deep Darlene's version had rooted. One cousin from Johnson City, Tammy, called me after Marlo reached out. She didn't buy it at first. Said Darlene's version didn't match what I was claiming. Tammy came around eventually. Took 2 months and a conversation with Britt. But for a while, I wondered if blowing everything open had been the right call. Then I think about Opal, and I stop wondering. Christmas was at Gus's house in Farragut. Smaller, quieter. No Darlene. But the people there, Porter, Willa, Gus, Trish, Marlo, Britt, Calla, me, They looked at me without the softness, without the pity. They were actually seeing me. Just me. No filter. I was at Gus's kitchen counter helping Trish make cornbread when Porter came and stood in the doorway. He watched me for a second, then walked over and put his hand on my shoulder. "Your daddy would be proud of you, Rhea," he said. "He would be so damn proud."
That's when I cried. First time since any of it started. Right there at the counter, with batter on my hands and Christmas music coming from the living room. I cried for 30 seconds, wiped my face on a dish towel, and finished the cornbread. Because that's what we do. We feel it, and we keep going. Before I close, this story is a work of fiction, but the feelings are real, and so are yours. I want to say something to you now. To anyone who stayed through this whole thing, thank you. I know that sounds simple, but I mean it in a way that's hard to put together in words. Telling this story, the money, the lies, the manufactured pity, my grandmother dying worried because of something that wasn't real, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than any crosswind landing. Harder than any check ride. Harder than sitting on my kitchen floor at midnight staring at a spreadsheet with 6 figures in the total column. Because this was my family. And saying out loud that the person you loved most was the one hurting you the worst. That changes something inside you that doesn't come back the same shape. If this reached you, if you're the person quietly holding up someone else's life while they take the credit and call you the burden, please hear me. Hit subscribe. Not for my numbers, for the next story. Because there's always a next one. And sometimes the thing that finally lets you put the weight down is hearing someone else say, "I carried that too." What's your version of this? Who's your Darlene? How long did you carry it before you said something? The comments are open. I read every single one. And I promise the people in this community will hear you. And if you want more, if you need stories that remind you that the truth survives, even when someone tells a prettier lie, there's a whole library on this channel. Click around. Stay as long as you need. I drive out to the farmhouse some Saturday mornings now. Not for events, just for the porch. I sit in Opal's rocking chair with coffee and watch the mist lift off the ridge behind the property. The taxes still come from my account. Porter offered to split them. I said okay. Last Saturday, Calla came with me. She drove herself, got her license in January, bought a used Honda with money she earned shelving books at the Maryville Library. We sat on the porch and didn't say much. She was reading. I was watching the fog. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled something out. A friendship bracelet. Embroidery thread. Blue and green. Tied in the same pattern I'd taught her years ago. "I made you something," she said, like it was nothing. I looked at it for a long time. Then I slid it onto my wrist, next to my watch. 2 bracelets, 20 years apart, made by Youngman girls who chose each other on purpose. I'm Rhea Youngman. I'm 38 years old. I'm a commercial pilot, a homeowner, and the woman who paid $347,211 for a family that thought she couldn't pay her own rent. I'd do it again. Not for Darlene. For the porch. For the pie. For Calla sitting next to me with her book and her bracelet and her steady, quiet courage. Some debts aren't about money. The ones that matter never are.